What's up, everybody? Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. Mike, you got an interesting one for us, or a couple ones, a few stories about my favorite Halloween prop, hands.
Hands. Nothing but hands. So, no, we're not going all the way here. That's just a show about handies. You know, the most famous hand in the world is Thing, right? From the Addams Family.
Ooh, yeah, I would say so. I mean, you have
think
to.
Of a more famous hand than, unless maybe Ash's evil hand.
Ooh, good call. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are like the two most famous.
The hamburger helper hand? Or is he just a glove?
Hand. Oh yeah. Was he a disembodied hand?
No, he was just a glove, I think.
Oh, that's.
You don't
is
count.
There proof
Fuck
though?
Off.
Is there proof that there wasn't a hand in there?
Yeah, because the top of his head was like the opening to the glove, and he would like bend forward, and it was just hollowed out.
Oh, okay. All right. You win this time. I remember as a kid, for Christmas one year, Christmas of all holidays, I think it was my uncle. I don't remember. I was like really fucking young, like probably 4, maybe 5 at the oldest. But he gave me this for Christmas. It was a hand. It was like an adult-sized human hand that had a wired remote on it that you could turn on and off. And that when you turn it on, the fingers would just kind of move around on the hand and the hand would vibrate. So it would kind of give the illusion of like somebody waggling their fingers.
Right. And
I knew it was, he gave it to me, so I knew it was fake, but something about it was just creepy to me. I fucking hated it.
Dude, that'd be a cool gag if you would be willing to like replace that thing all the time, because like just putting that like around the corner at a store would be hours of fun.
Just random fingers wagging around the corner.
Right.
Yeah. But there's a lot of stories about these disembodied hands. And what really, the first story that I remember hearing was on a website. I think it might have been Fantasy Tour, which I mentioned before was where I posted that Skinwalker Ranch story. But I remember there was a thread on there about personal paranormal stories. And the first time I heard anybody talk about these disembodied hands, they were talking about laying in bed, but it was during the day. They weren't sleeping or anything. And they were just kind of like laying in bed, hanging out. And they looked over, and from the crack where their bed was up against the wall, but from the crack where the bed meets the wall was this gray hand just like sticking out of the crack on their bed.
Ugh.
And they said they were watching it thinking like maybe their blanket is wadded up weird, and because the curtains are drawn, the shadows making it look like a hand. And they just kept watching it, and it didn't move, but it was just this hand chilling there. And then they like turned over or closed their eyes or something, and when they looked back, it was gone. The hand was gone. I heard this story probably like 10 years ago now, but I remember when I read about it, or when I read this person's story, it just was so fucking creepy to me. Like, what was that hand doing there? And yeah, sure, it's just some asshole on a message board, so, they could be making it up. But it's weird to me that there's a lot of stories out there like this.
Right.
And a lot of these stories seem to be mostly kids or teenagers. It's not really something that's experienced by adults. And a lot of the time it's adults remembering these memories. And the weird thing is there's times where the adults will completely forget about it until something will trigger the memory that there's, that they experienced this weird, creepy, disembodied hand.
It's weird. Such a weird thing. Like just hands. Like hearing that story about the one with the bed. So like you said, what's that hand doing? Is that something trying to come through? Is that partial manifestation? What is a hand gonna do? Is something else has to follow that hand?
Yeah, and that's the weirdest thing about these is a lot of the times the hands are coming from places that it's impossible for a person to be. Like I said, that one was coming up from the crack between a bed and a wall.
Ugh, gosh.
And I'll get into some other stories where there's hands in impossible places too, but that's the weirdest part because the hands are always they're angled in a way where it's impossible that something could be there, but they're angled so that you can't tell if the hand is disembodied or if there's something attached to it that you just can't see.
Right.
Like it'll be like the hand will be coming from around a corner. So you just see the hand, but you don't see what it's attached to, or it's coming up between a crack or from, over the side of furniture or something. But it's the whole memory thing where it only happens to kids and teenagers, and oftentimes adults forget about it until they're reminded of it. That makes me think that there's something more to it. That it's not a normal like pareidolia or just sleep hallucinations or something like that.
Yeah, there's plenty of other things that are strange and paranormal that afflict a certain type of people with sleep issues and sleep paralysis and all that type of stuff. But it being children and younger people, I always find that interesting. We talked about that before with other ghost stories. You talked about like maturity level of these children and what's attracted to that, I guess. Do you think it could be like possibly a maturing of the brain, of them being able to notice things that we can't, attract things that we can't see into?
I think it's in a lot of ways just the innocence. And I'm not saying like it's feeding on the innocence of children or anything nefarious like that. I think it's innocence in the sense where children are more open to other possibilities. Their mind hasn't been shut off to these things yet. Like society, even if you're a believer in these things, there's still that doubt. Like, well, what if that's not real? There's still the skeptical part of you because you're trying to be a rational adult and human being,
right?
But it's still it's as a child you don't have that doubt. The world is open. You're still learning about the world. You don't know all the ins and outs of what's going on in the world. You don't know what the limits of reality are, what the limits of possibility are. So everything is a possibility at that point. And I think because of that, you're more attuned to these, I don't really want to say frequencies, but you're more open to these sort of experiences.
Definitely trying to be rational 100% of the time is an adult quality that we all try to possess. Most of us, anyway, should strive to be practicing, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, fucking the Ninja Turtles movie when Raphael runs across the street and almost gets hit by the cabbie. And that guy says, "Did you see that?" And says, "What? You never seen a guy in a turtle costume before?" And it's just like that's perfect. It's like they didn't even consider that that was like an actual turtle.
Right, right. Like that's so far out of the realm of possibility. It's definitely a dude in a costume.
Right, right. And the kid would be like, "Nope, that definitely looked like a 4-foot turtle. God damn it."
Yeah, that's a perfect example of it. But so what I want to do, I'm gonna kind of go into some of these. I guess I'm gonna read some of the sightings that have been posted in various corners of the internet. So I want to start there just to kind of paint a better picture of what these things are, or what people are experiencing, at least what they're reporting. But I've got a case that's more well documented, that I'll get into later. And this phenomenon was even written about in the Bible. But, there's a lot of crazy phenomena that occur in the Bible. So is it related? Maybe. We'll let you figure it out, or decide, or, debunk at your leisure. So the first story that I want to share is by, I'll just refer to this person as Jen. So Jen was talking about when she was younger, in her early teens. She had the chance to stay home alone at night. Her parents went out for the evening, and so she was staying up, eating junk food and drinking soda, and the things that young teenagers do that they can't get away with when mom and dad are home. And so she's hanging out in her bedroom, listening to music, doing whatever, and decides to go to the kitchen. As she goes to the kitchen, she gets the sense that she's being watched by something. So she runs down the hall, goes to the kitchen, opens up the pantry door. And when she opens the pantry door and she gets out the snacks and everything, and then she turns around, and from the other side of the pantry door, she sees this pair of white hands wrap around the side of the door. So to kind of, I guess, paint the picture, the way it was described is the pantry door was open against the wall. So think of like a cabinet door being open. The door itself was about half the length of the wall and no more than 1.5 feet wide. And the distance between the door and the wall was no more than 6 inches. So it's impossible, completely impossible, that anybody could be hiding behind this door with their hands wrapped around it.
Dude, I gotta say, like, being someone who's experienced a fair amount of creepy things in my life, I think just seeing some like physical hands coming out of somewhere that they can't be coming out of, like completely silent, just opening this pantry to get something late at night. Let's say you want some Pringles, and you go to grab the door, and you just see out of the corner of your eye, there's these huge hands that are wrapped around it, and as you turn your head, they're still there. Fuck all that.
Yeah, fuck all that indeed. But here's where this story gets even weirder. So this happened when she was a young teenager. Now move ahead to, she's an adult. She had, she's moved away from home, but now she's coming back home. Her sister is getting married, so her sister still lives in the area. So she goes back home, stays with her parents, and her sister comes out when she's getting ready for the wedding and walks out. She stops and she kind of laughs, and she says, "I remember when I saw hands right there." And she points to this corner in the foyer, and then she's like, "Do you think this house is haunted?" And Jen had never heard her sister mention these hands before, and she never mentioned the hands to her sister. So it was one of those things where they had both kind of witnessed it independently, never talked about it, and now as adults, it's being brought up, and they're discussing it. So they'd both only seen that one time, but they both, it was in different places, but they both experienced the white hands. So one came up out of a corner and the other one from behind a fucking pantry door.
Gosh. Yeah. Again, fuck that. And then a shared experience. I mean, if they're two different places, I was going to say poltergeist activity, but
And that's it. There's no other, nothing that goes along with it. No voice, no haunting things. It's just this weird hand. And then that's it. It's fucked up.
It is fucked up. What if that's all it can do? Like, that's all it can manifest. And that's why it's just a hand. Fuck, what if it's a hand monster? Fuck all that.
Yeah. I've got another story where a hand was witnessed by siblings and not discussed until they were an adult.
Huh.
This one was an anonymous poster, but they were talking about how they were home alone. Again, but this was during an afternoon, not at night. But they were. This was a female. She didn't say her name, so I don't know what it is. But she was home alone. She decided she was going to call her boyfriend and talk to him without being interrupted by her parents or her siblings. So she's on the phone and they're talking for a while, and she's in her room. All of a sudden, from the side of the bed, this hand comes up, and she said it pounded on the bed 3 times, and it just happened really fast, but it was loud enough that her boyfriend was able to actually hear the sound of something hitting the bed. And then she freaked out, ran out of the room. And when she came back, it was gone. She never saw anything again. But she confirmed with this guy she was talking to that he was concerned. He told her to leave the house and call her parents because he was concerned that someone had broken in and was under her bed. So she called her parents. They came home. They looked under the bed. Nothing was there. And they never, they didn't see anything. They figured she was hallucinating or whatever. But she knew because her boyfriend also heard the sound. So she was convinced that what she saw was not a hallucination. So she grows up. She's hanging out with her sister. They're talking, and she had never talked to her sister about this experience before. Only her parents knew about it. So they're adults now, and she's talking to her sister, and her sister thought that sounded weird and kind of familiar to her. And she said that she had forgotten all about this, but when her and her little brother were between the ages of 5 and 8, they used to believe that there was this, what they called a scary hand that would chase them out of certain rooms of the house. But it would specifically chase them down this hallway where the bedrooms were located. And it would just like randomly appear and chase them out of the room or out of the hallway.
Whoa. Say that again?
The hand would just appear and chase them out of the hallway or the room and then disappear. And it was something that she had completely forgotten about until her sister told her about seeing the hand on the bed. And then she recalled having this experience as a child with their younger brother.
That's weird, and it sounds kind of hokey when you hear it, like, they remembered when they heard this story, but I have a similar story with the Easter Bunny thing that I saw, so it's very interesting coming from that angle. Like, there must have been something, in both of these cases, there must have been something around where they live. I just wonder what the disembodied, just the hands, I wonder if there's like
this is a weird one because while the one who's telling the story only saw the hand come up over the bed and hit the bed, they actually saw this hand chase them. So in that instance, it wasn't just coming out from around a corner or through a crack where you just see this hand.
Right.
It was actually actively pursuing them, according to them. But what I want to know is, was it a floating hand or was it crawling across the floor? And which one would be creepier?
Right. That's what I wanted to know. Did it just like appear like a cheesy Chevy Chase Invisible Man, like just an arm, like it was running? Or was it something like flopping on the floor, violently flailing about because that's its only mode of transportation?
Or maybe it was like a video game and it just kind of like floating towards them ominously.
Right.
You know, like in Castlevania.
Slightly twirling in a circle as it comes forward.
You need to get out your whip and whip it. And get the heart or the money bag that drops.
Or the potion or...
Yeah. Whatever goodie gets dropped, you need to grab that shit. Otherwise it'll disappear. So that's reason enough to always keep a whip in your house just in case you get pursued by a floating hand.
Right.
You just uncoil that sumbitch and let it crack. But there's so many stories that are like this. There's another story from an anonymous poster who said that when they were younger, they went into their room and they went to sit down on their bed. It was during the day, so it wasn't dark out. The lighting was good. They went to sit on their bed, look over towards the door. They didn't close their door all the way, but they looked over towards the door, and hanging over the top of the door was a woman's hand, just hanging over the top of the door. And it just sat there. There was no arm hanging over. It was just the hand. Sat there for 15 minutes and then was gone.
Did it disappear or did they just like take their eyes off of it and look
No,
back
they took their eyes off it, but they, it was one of those things where they would periodically look back. So over the course of 15 minutes, every time they looked back, this female hand was still hanging over the top of the door. And then at some point, it was gone.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's scary as shit.
I've seen a few of those photos. I've always liked them where it's like a group of people and then there's just a hand there that doesn't make sense or belong to anybody. Have you seen those?
No.
Oh yeah, I'll send you some. I've always run into these photos to where it's like three friends. One's got their arm around each other and someone's
yeah.
Yeah, there's just a limb that's unaccounted for. Those would be freakier to me, but like working with like computer art programs and stuff like that. I mean, it just seems like somebody tried to remove somebody from a photo and like did everything except the hand and went, whoa, that's weird looking. Because it's easy enough to do. Right.
Yeah. And sometimes even just with the developing process, things get fucked up.
Right.
But I mean, I'm not going to continue going on with the internet stories. Most of the internet stories are in the same way. Just a random hand peeking out of nowhere where it shouldn't be. And like saying that now, I'm looking, I've got a bookshelf to my left and there's like a small crack between the bookshelf, or I shouldn't say crack, like there's a small gap between the edge of the bookshelf and the wall. It's like maybe 2 inches. And I'm just picturing how fucking terrified I would be if there was a hand sticking out of there right now. Oh, God. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, where I live has a fireplace, and it's got one of those old school, like, sheet of chains that cover it. So it's like a drape made of chains, and I'm just waiting for something to poke its fucking hand out of there or face or something.
Yeah, it's coming, man.
I know it.
Ugh.
And here I am without a robo knee.
I know. You got to fight more barn owls, man.
Yeah.
Get those cybernetic implants.
That's the prize of the Kumite, is your cybernetic implants.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not banned, believe it or not. So, I'll be ready to go again soon. Just you wait. You're all going down. There was this book that came out, I think it was in 2015. But it was called Creepy But True, Tales for the Campfire. And they're all these short, I think it was like 100 different stories or something. They're all short but true stories that are written by various authors telling various creepy stories that, or experiences that they had. And there's stuff like cryptid sightings, UFO sightings, but there was one in there. It was written by Tangerina Arena, and it was called The Hand. But she describes playing with this Barbie dream house when she was a little kid. And she's just sitting there playing, like any kid would do, when all of a sudden, over the top of the house, this adult-sized hand comes up and started moving its fingers and like moving back and forth from side to side like a spider across the top of the dollhouse.
Oh.
But there was nothing, like there was no one behind the dollhouse. There was no arm that she could see. She just saw this hand come up over the top of the roof and dance back and forth across the roof. So she gets up and screams and runs out, tells her grandma. So her grandma comes running in, and nothing was there. She never saw the hand again, but it was this one-time thing, this weird one-time thing where this fucking hand pops up.
God, that is so weird. I wonder how much more impactful it would have been to have witnessed something like that than the stuff that I have witnessed that doesn't make sense. I don't think I can. I mean, like something that's like a weird sound, maybe something you see that you don't understand, you can forget about, rationalize, whatever. But seeing something like hands that you know what it is, and knowing that it's not supposed to be there, I don't see myself ever going back into a room that I've seen that in, like ever.
I know what you mean. It's kind of like like when people are afraid of spiders and they go to kill a spider and it like falls behind something and like, I didn't kill it and it's still in here. I'm not going in that room again.
Right.
But I don't think I shouldn't say that. In most cases, I don't think that it's relegated to one room. Like I don't think you can be like, I can't go in that room anymore because that's where the ghost hand lives. But I mean, maybe you are one of the unfortunate ones that are haunted by a ghost hand, and the ghost hand just floats in that one place. Every now and again, it'll slap you upside your head, give you a wet willy.
Does a credit check. You're all, hey.
Yeah. You're in the middle of talking and it just sticks its finger in your mouth. But it's a ghost hand, so what are you going to do? But the worst part is these hands are usually either pure white, gray, or hairy.
Hairy?
Hairy. So it's, I don't know. They're just unsettling. There's a story in the Bible about disembodied hands, or a disembodied hand showing up. And it was being used as a messenger of God. So, maybe that's what these things are. But in the story, it's from the book of Daniel. King Belshazzar was holding this huge feast for 1,000 nobles in his kingdom. And everyone was getting drunk, and the drunker King Belshazzar got, the crazier he wanted his party to be. So at some point he gets drunk and he orders the gold and silver chalices that his father, who was King Nebuchadnezzar, that his father had stolen from God's temple of Jerusalem. And he had them all brought in, and he took these sacred chalices and started filling them with wine so that his nobles, his wives, and all his concubines would be able to drink from these sacred chalices. So when they're all brought in, everyone starts drinking from them. And as they're drinking from them, obviously they're getting drunker. And these are, again, taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem. But King Belshazzar and his people are using them, and they're praising their own gods. So as they drink from these and they start to praise their gods, all of a sudden this hand appears and it begins to write on the walls of this room that this dining hall, this party is taking place in. And the disembodied hand just starts writing all of these words on the wall that nobody can decipher. So King Belshazzar gets all freaked out because, there's a ghost hand writing in some weird letters on his wall. So King Belshazzar has no idea what it says, so he calls upon anyone in his kingdom, whoever can read the writing on the wall and tell him what it means. He's going to make them rich and famous. He's going to give them a fancy purple robe. He's going to give them a gold chain, and they will be third in command of his kingdom.
Ooh.
So he calls on the Babylonian Magi. They come in. They, one by one, try to read. They can't make any sense of it, which freaks the king out because he's like, these guys are fucking wizards. And as we've established on the last episode, wizards, you gotta respect the wizards.
Yeah, this king's kissed a couple butt fronts.
He's kissed a couple front butts in his day, but he starts to panic, and he went pale, and because he's freaking out, all of his nobles are freaking out. Then the queen hears about all this, and the queen comes down to the banquet hall, and she says that there's one man in the kingdom, one badass who's filled with the divine Holy Spirit, one man who can read this. And he was known to King Belshazzar's father, Nebuchadnezzar. And his father had actually made him the head of all magicians, enchanters, fortune tellers, and diviners in his kingdom. And this was Daniel. Again, it's the book of Daniel. So Daniel is this badass. So, but Daniel was renamed by the king to be Belteshazzar. So very similar to his son's name, but he is Belteshazzar, whereas the king now is Baltazar. So, look there. So, they call in Daniel. I'm just going to call him Daniel because it's his book. We're going to call him Daniel. So they call him Daniel, and the king tells him his offer. I'm going to make you rich. I'm going to give you this fancy robe. You're going to get the chains. You're going to be third in command. Daniel's like, fuck all that. I don't want your shit. I don't want to be the kingdom, but I'll read this for you. So he sits down. He gives him this whole warning of how his father knew about God, or how his father started out as this person who was all, I guess, selfish and arrogant and thought himself higher than God and everything. But then he becomes humbled by God, and as a result is rewarded with this kingdom. And his son now is going the opposite way, where he was raised in this beautiful kingdom given by God, and now he's regressing back to being just a selfish dick, basically. So he gives him this warning saying, learn from your father's lessons and know you're not above God, blah, 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 all that stuff. So he tells him that God sent the hand on the wall, and he wrote 3 words: Mene, Tekel, and Peres. And I'm probably pronouncing all of them wrong, but I'm doing my best, guys. So then he interprets these words and what they mean. Mene. This means God has numbered the days of your rule, and they don't add up. Tekel. You have been weighed on the scales, and you don't weigh much. Peres. Your kingdom has been divided up and handed over to the Medes and Persians. So at the conclusion of this, even though Daniel said he didn't want to be rewarded, he still gave Daniel a fancy robe, gave him the chain, and said he was third in command of the kingdom. Later that night, King Belshazzar was murdered, And this guy named Darius, who was a Mede, succeeded him as the king.
Dun, dun, dun.
So this disembodied hand foretold his death, and it wasn't until he found out what it meant that it actually came true.
Right. So this is a fortune-telling hand.
Or maybe it's a doomsaying hand.
Right.
Or maybe these hands are wizard hands.
Ooh.
And that hand, it cast the spell with words, and when the words were uttered and deciphered, the spell took hold.
Right.
And yeah, he was murdered, but it was because of the spell. The magic murdered him, Mateo.
I believe it. Oh, man, dude. So now we're talking about magic hands. Yes.
Murderous hands. And with that, I would like to talk about the most murdery hands of all. The hairy hands of Dartmoor.
Ooh.
That just got a good song title right there, you know? The hairy hands of Dartmoor.
Yeah. We're gonna have to do that one too. We got
I guess.
Till demanded the Cannibal Crackhead song.
The Cannibal Crackhead song?
Yeah, from the last episode.
We talked about cannibal crackheads in the last episode?
Yeah, I guess at one point. We're not even drunk when we do these shows, guys. We're old, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, I'll gladly do a song about a cannibal crackhead. That sounds like a lovely time. But the murderous hairy hands, come on, the hairy hands of Dartmoor. I can hear it now. Legend of the hairy hands. It starts in the early, like the 1910s through the 1920s is when they were most active, I should say. In the 1910s, it started with this stretch of road, which is now known as B3212. It's in Devon, England, which crosses Dartmoor. It's a stretch of road that runs between a place called Post Bridge and Two Bridges. But in the early 1900s, people on bikes would say that their handlebars would just get wrenched out of their hands. And when it would, like, just some force would just grab the handlebars and drive them into the ditch, basically. And there were even people that were taking horses or pony-drawn carts that would also experience this, where something would just drive them off the road and they would end up in the ditch. And as cars became more popular in the 1920s, people driving cars would experience this with their steering wheel, where it would feel like the steering wheel was being wrenched out of their hands. And same with motorcycles. But there were frequently accidents that occurred along this stretch as a result of this. And everyone would always say that it felt like something was grabbing their handlebars or grabbing the wheel of their vehicle and forcing them off the road. As if, like a strong pair of hands were grabbing it and going off the road. Typically, it would just result in damage to the vehicle or some minor injury. But in 1921, there was a Dr. Helby who was a doctor at a local prison. He was driving his motorcycle, and in the sidecar were the two daughters of the deputy governor of Dartmoor Prison. And while he was driving, for some reason, he told these two girls who were in the sidecar of his motorcycle to jump out. And they did. They jumped out. And as soon as they jumped out, his motorcycle went off the road and he died. He ended up cracking his skull open when his motorcycle went off the road. There was a witness on the scene. The girls said that he just said that he couldn't control the bike and he told them to get off because he thought he was going to crash. But there was a witness who said it looked like there was a second pair of hands on his handlebars of the motorcycle when he went off the road. Officially, it was ruled that it was an accident because the wheel spokes and the axle on his motorcycle broke. That's the official story. But there was not too long after this, there was a army officer who got injured again on his motorcycle. He was driving down the stretch of road and he crashed. He lived, but he said that what happened was, as he was driving, there was this huge set of hairy hands that just clamped down over his hands and forced the bike to go off the road. And then about, I think it was a year later, or maybe it was a couple years later, there was a couple who was actually camping in a caravan on this stretch of road. And the woman, the wife of the couple, woke up in the middle of the night and she saw this hairy hand on the window of their caravan. And she said she made the sign of the cross and started saying the prayers, and the hand just kind of went down off the window and was gone.
Oh, man.
And then that night, well, I should say the next morning, there was a car found that was upturned in the ditch with its driver dead. And the cause of the accident was never established.
Man, so fuck those other hands we talked about being famous. These hands have actually killed people.
It forces people to go off the road. There was a couple years after these incidents, there was a situation where this bus was a bus without a top on it, was taking tourists along this road. And as the vehicle was going down the road, it, for no reason at all, swerved, went across the other side of the road, hit an embankment, and because this was the 1920s, seatbelt laws weren't a thing. So a bunch of the passengers ended up getting ejected out of the bus, and one of them got injured. But afterwards, the driver was reporting what happened, and he said this pair of hairy hands grabbed the wheel and forced him off the road.
Wow. So this is like, how many people now?
I mean, if you're counting everybody on the bus, it's a whole bunch, but this is just 4 cases so far.
Wow.
But I mean, there's stories that this place was avoided even before it became a popular roadway.
Really?
Yeah. And there were stories that there's been plenty of stories about it too. There's one story that says that there was a witch who was hung there sometime in the Middle Ages, and she cursed the area, and that's where the first death occurred. There's a story that the hands are someone who died in an accident there in the late 1800s. Because they died there, they now haunt the roadway, but for some reason it's only their hands. There's another story. There's actually a local there's a gunpowder factory local to the area called the Powder Mills Factory. And there's a story that there was a man who worked there who was known for having these large, really hairy hands. And he ended up getting this large inheritance from one of his relatives who still lived in Italy. But because he received this inheritance, he no longer had to work at the factory. So on his last day there, all of his coworkers threw a big party for him. And as the night died down, he decided he wanted to keep his tools as a memento of his time spent making gunpowder in this factory. Now, the floor of the factory is a granite stone floor. So because of that, you're not supposed to wear, like back in the day, the old work boots were put together they using iron nails, called hobnail boots is what they were called. But because the floor is granite, if you've got iron nails in your boots, the potential to create a spark is there, and you're in a gunpowder factory. But because he was off work, he was wearing his boots, didn't think about it when he went back in, and created this spark, which basically blew him to pieces. And all that was left of him were his hands. So this story, to me, it sounds like it's a urban legend to kind of go along with the story. But there have been documented explosions at this factory, and there were many people who died or received severe injuries as a result. But going back to a time frame that would have kind of fit within here, in 1851, there was a fire at Dartmoor Powder Works, which later became the Powder Mills factory. But there was a fire which resulted due to the gunpowder igniting, and there was a man who got burned to death during that time. The next morning, there was actually another explosion at the place that blew the whole place down.
Ooh.
And that was reported in the Bell's Weekly Messenger in 1851. And then a few years later, in 1857, there was another explosion who killed another worker there. So that's another explanation for what could possibly be going on there.
Right. It's almost like it has to be true. That legend about that guy exploding and his hands being left behind. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that happened there one time. Tons of shit explodes there.
Yeah. There's also people that say that there's nothing paranormal going on. Most of the accidents that happen are caused by people who are unfamiliar with the area or considered outsiders to the area. There was one person in the 1920s who tried to say that there were magnetic rocks that were on the side of this roadway and that the magnetic fields in the rocks were causing people's handlebars to get wrenched out of their hands, which is kind of silly.
Very silly.
Yeah. But there are still sightings of this.
To this day?
Yes. There was one in the most recent one I could find was 2008. But this was a driver saying he was driving along that stretch of road, and out of nowhere, this huge pair of, he said they looked like hairy paws, but they just appeared out of nowhere, grabbed his hands on the steering wheel, and tried to drive him off the road. He was able to keep control of his car and stay out. There's still people, even now, that say as they're driving, they feel this, what feels like a hand grabbing their wheel and trying to pull them off the road.
Wow. What if that's just like a weird phenomenon that happens in certain places, but I don't know, maybe they've honed their skill and now they can just remain completely invisible, and that's why we have traffic accidents?
Bigfoot ghosts. And because they've got such big feet, when they die, they just become hands instead.
That is so weird.
Yeah, this is the only one where the only place or story that I've seen where there's been repeat incidents with these hands. And it's so fucking weird. Like, why are there, why? And how come some people see the hands, but other people just feel the sensation of having their steering wheel pulled on?
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
I wonder if that dude who told those little kids to bail saw those hands, or...
Yeah, it's not clear because he died. His skull was split, and that's how he died. But somebody who witnessed it said that they saw what looked like a second pair of hands on his handlebars.
Wow.
So, I mean, unless the dude was a freak and had 4 hands. But the girls themselves did not see any hands. They said he just started losing control and told him to bail.
Wow. Definitely changes how spooky those Halloween decorations of just hands are.
Yeah. Yeah, like those ones with the you put in your trunk or your car door where it looks like there's a hand sticking out.
Right.
Yep. Very creepy. I don't know, man. I don't know what to make of it. It's just it freaks me out and I don't like it. And I don't want to see hands coming out of weird places.
Right. For some reason, it makes me think of like a type of yokai, like a very specific type of being.
And it is weird because a lot of the stories seem to be in bedrooms. So, which seems fitting for like a yokai sort of entity.
Uh-huh.
You know, because they're usually location specific. So maybe they're yokai. I don't know. I like it just... It's just so weird. It's one of those weird fucking things. Like, what are they doing? Why is there just a hand there?
Yeah. And they vary wildly. Pale, white, gray, big, huge, hairy ones, and now paws.
Yeah. But, I mean, he could have just been saying paws because they were hairy.
Yeah, but how hairy? I mean, were they like Bluto's hands or like the Wolfman's hands?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Because they're just described as being hairy, but it doesn't say like Wolfman hairy, and it doesn't say like you know, Bluto hairy, or George the Animal Steel hairy. I don't know. Maybe they just want a good handshake, a nice firm handshake. Would you shake a disembodied hand's hand?
As long as I'm not driving now, because now I know what it'll do. It's just waiting for me to take one hand off to greet it lovingly. And
or maybe the hands are Jesus.
That's where they're taking the wheel?
Jesus, take the wheel.
Boom.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.